Newzroom Africa has learned that Ntuthuko Shoba has been axed by the JSE during Ntuthuko's last court appearance. The court heard that he used a JSE landline to contact the convicted killer Mzigayise Malipane. Shoba is accused of orchestrating Ntuthuko murder in June 2020. For more on the story, I'm joined by our reporter Linda Mnisi, who has been following the twists and turns in this particular case. Linda, certainly another twist, as we saw the twist yesterday. But before we go to the twist of yesterday in court, the JSE has decided to terminate his employee. Why now?
Well, Bunga, it's unclear, but what we do know at this point is that his employment was, terminated a couple of days ago, when asked around why exactly it is that they've terminated his contract. They say that these are confidential reasons and they're unable to tell us at this particular point, but we do know that officially Ntuthuko Shoba is no longer an employee of the JSE. But you'll also remember that in fact he had said previously in court that he was placed on cautionary leave. It is one of his personal circumstances that he told the court, that my job is central to my grandmother's needs. He spoke about his frail grandmother who previously did not know that he was incarcerated and was worried, but most importantly about her health, saying that he in fact pays for the person that looks after his grandmother, and that comes from the money that he gets from his employment. He says that if he loses his job, because at that point in his affidavit he says that his job is in jeopardy, and if he loses his job he also will not be able to pay for his house and of course all other expenses, including that of his grandmother's health.
And, part of what we saw yesterday is you talk about yet another twist, because he talks about his grandmother, but there's also another person that he's been speaking about who's very central to this particular case. Of course, that's Ntuthuko Shoba, who's no more now. But one of the things that he has been saying is that he has been taking care of Ntuthuko, but certainly the court is not convinced.
Absolutely, Bongiwe. And before we speak about, Ntuthuko and the relationship, we heard earlier on, like you mentioned, that he's said to have used the JSE's landline, to contact Mzigayise Malipane, and one wonders if it was in fact in the alleged murder and the conspiracy thereof to commit this murder. I want to take you back to yesterday when that issue was mentioned by the state. Take a listen.
4.4, a statement was obtained from personnel from JSE as per A47. Such statement confirmed that on 26 May 2020, a call was remotely made by the applicant from JSE landline and connected to a certain mobile phone. I was able to establish that the said mobile phone connected to JSE was not registered in the applicant's name, and it was used to contact Mr. Malapane several times between the period of 20 May 2020 and 14 June 2020.
So when we hear what we're hearing is that it is not only the JSE's landline that could have been used to make contact with the deceased Ntuthuko Shoba and Mzigayise. In fact, his registered SIM card was also used to contact, but also the court hears about this other number that is not registered, which he allegedly also used to make contact. And you also asked me about the issue around the relationship. I mean, during this bail application, one may assume that it's still early days. We're hearing now of the details around the relationship that he had with Ntuthuko Shoba. In his affidavit, he states that they were actually, in fact, happy on the 4th of June, the day that Ntuthuko died. They were happy, talking about the baby's arrival and going to buy the clothes and all of that. He says he's always been present in the baby's life and Ntuthuko's life ever since he knew of the pregnancy. He also revealed how they got together, saying that it was during a brief breakup with his long-term partner, saying that at this particular point he did not even imagine himself handing his unborn child to a murderer. But of course, WhatsApp messages and the telephonic records reveal much which the state says is contrary to what he's saying. Let's take a listen.
The next day, 13 February 2020, the deceased inquired from the applicant if they were still going to the doctor the next day. The applicant confirmed the arrangement, but at the same time complained about finances. On 13 February 2020 at 13:38, the deceased inquired from the applicant if they are still on for the day. She further told him she does not have data and that the applicant should instead call. The applicant replied at 14:01 as follows: "Hi baby, we'll call you just now in a meeting. We have a data problem, but you are bringing a child to this world. Very unfair, I must say." The message infuriated the deceased as it shows from her replies. The applicant apologized and blamed stress, to which the deceased replied as follows: "Stressful, won't be able to tell your girlfriend that you are expecting a baby. I did not choose to be pregnant twice with your child." The deceased sent 2 WhatsApp voice notes to the applicant at 17:35, to which the applicant replied with a voice note followed by the deceased sending the applicant the following message at 18:10. "Don't dare shout at me. You should have thought twice before you should have told Hori, I can't afford to buy myself data and bring a child to this world."
So certainly, Linda, this issue of going to the doctor is really a big issue here.
Indeed. I mean, we heard how on numerous occasions Ntuthuko Shoba tried to get him to assist her in terms of going to the doctor. She speaks about wanting to take medication. At some point, we heard how, she had ulcer and heartburn issues, and he brought her medication, and the court hearing that at some point, she even asked him, "Are you sure this is ulcer and heartburn medication?" Because really at this point, she was feeling really, really unwell. But also at the center of this was indeed the child, and whether the baby was to be kept. We heard for the very first time that this was in fact not the first pregnancy, that it was the second. The first one had been aborted. So at this particular point, Ntuthuko Shoba, in the court documents, we heard saying that she did not want to risk it this time around. And like you heard in the previous bite, saying that, well, you don't even want to tell your partner about this pregnancy. But let's take a listen, Bongo, at that issue in particular.
It was only, as usual, that the deceased initiated the conversation at 2019, requesting the applicant to call her, followed by messages about her aunt complaining about her covering for the applicant and the previous abortion. The applicant replied at 22:17 as follows: "Teho, I'm done trying to be a good guy. Do you do what you wish?" At 23:01, the deceased sent the applicant a message that reads: "So, do you blame me when I say I don't trust you anymore? I'm so scared anything can happen to me so that you can be out of this mess." The deceased started attending her antenatal at clinic as of 19 March 2020, and the applicant was the person who organized her transportation in the form of Uber rides, as he has been doing all the time when she was invited at his residence or leaving his residence. At 13:29, the deceased sent the applicant a message that reads: "I know you don't want this child, but I was not going to live with myself for I aborted the child at 3 months. I'm not that evil. I just felt that God was going to punish me for doing that, and to think it was not my first time doing it. Sorry for ruining your plans of life. I did not mean to."
Sure, Linda, difficult to hear, hey, when you really hear the prosecution there just reading out, these messages. But certainly, as much as it's difficult for us, it must have been difficult for Ntuthuko's family sitting through this kind of evidence.
Indeed, Bongyo. I mean, we spoke to the uncle as per usual after the proceedings, and you could see, I mean, even during the proceedings, the shock in his face when all these details were revealed, teary and really looking like he was absolutely defeated after hearing all of this, saying that they didn't even know that she was pregnant. Initially, with the aborted child, they did not know, and it's quite clear at this point that they've lost 3 lives to the same man. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Also shocking to us as a family that this was actually the second child that she was carrying of the very same man. So we didn't know that she was pregnant before. We didn't know. we've been robbed of 3 lives as a family by the same man.
And Linda, when one then really listens to this particular soundbite, it's really a devastated family here, and they talk about this, and this evidence is coming out, and they, are reacting to 3 lives that have now been lost. But certainly, when you look at how Ntuthuko is sitting in this courtroom, he appears unmoved, but obviously you're sitting in the court and certainly watching his movements. How has he been?
Well, Bongiwe, you'll remember that from day one that Ntuthuko has been appearing in court. He's always kept a very cool demeanor. I mean, the one thing that everyone talks about, when you listen to conversations that are being held by journalists and everybody who's gathered in court, is how he comes, with different suits, dressed really, appropriately, but also not moving, not showing any emotion, so one is really unable to tell if he's shocked by the revelations or, if indeed he is moved or anything of that sort. It is very difficult to read exactly what is in his mind during this time. And we saw for the very first time, yesterday, he came out with a book. So every time there were these revelations, you would see him scribbling through the book. At times, you would see him just closing the book and, listening attentively to what was being said. So it has been really difficult to try and sort of gauge as to where he is mentally and what he's thinking, because, the only time that we hear him speak is when he's asked to confirm certain things in court. So in terms of his mental capacity and where he is in terms of his mental state, it's very difficult to tell.
Has his family said anything?
We haven't been able to, hear from his family, but for the very first time yesterday, we heard from his legal representative, who really spoke about, what they expect with these proceedings. He reiterated before we heard all that evidence that they are still confident that the state has a weak case against Ntuthuko Shoba. It's something that he himself said in the affidavit, saying that, the state relied on Malefane's guilty plea to finally make an arrest. So what he's saying at this point is that they will wait for all the proceedings to listen and hear exactly what the state has to bring forward. But I must also mention that during, his affidavit and his bail application, on numerous occasions, he was constantly warned by the prosecution to not reveal his defense, as it is early to do so. They told him that if you reveal your defense, that may be used against you in the subsequent trial. But if you choose to remain silent, which is your right, that cannot be used against you. But of course, he went on to reveal some of the details, and that's why we are here. So the next court appearance, then, Bongiwe, we're expecting to hear from his defense, who have indicated in court that they will respond to all the shocking details we heard yesterday.
Certainly. Linda, we are going to be watching developments in this particular matter very closely, and I know you'll be back in court next week when this matter resumes. And that's, of course, Linda Mnisi, who's been tracking developments in this case of Ntuthuko Shoba, who is the alleged mastermind in the death of his girlfriend, Tsahofatso Pule.